Otherwise, we've already.
There we go.
Does that mean we are live now?
Yeah.
So.
All right. Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Rob Greene. I write as R.W.W. Greene because he's easier to Google. Today, I released my third book through Angry Robot, Mercury Rising. And when asked what I wanted to do, I said I wanted to throw a dinner party. And this is the closest I can come to a dinner party where I invited some friends, some new friends, and some older friends in to talk about something I'm very interested about and something I'm very passionate about, which is the future of the genre, the future of science fiction. So I invited these fine, cool people with me, and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. I'm going to go call their name out because I'm not sure if they see themselves on the screen the same way I do. So I'm going to start with Ciel.
Hi, I'm Ciel Pierlot. I released my first novel back in February with Angry Robot. It's called Bluebird. It's like just fun, fast-paced sci-fi. If you like comedy and lesbians.
And shooting. There's a lot of shooting.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And some spaceships.
If you've ever played like a first-person shooter video game, and we're like, what about this? But it's lighthearted
with some romantic overtones and undertones, and yeah, it was a good book.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it a lot. It was great. Let's go with Jim Kelly.
Hi, I'm Jim Kelly. James Patrick Kelly. If on the bookshelf. I am, as I look at these happy, shining faces, I'm realizing they're the future, and I have a big, fat investment in the past. I've written 150 stories, and 7 novels, and I've been around for a while. My most recent book is a kind of a taster version from PM Press. It's an ongoing series in the Outspoken Author series. That's a tiny little chapbook, and it's got a bunch of stories, some of my best stories, several of my plays, and an essay, sort of historical essay about what it was like to be a cyberpunk back in the day when cyberpunk was being invented. I do not have a book scheduled. I had just finished a novel, though. And so if there are any Angry Robot editors listening tonight, I'm here. I have a book. I'm trying to sell it pretty soon. I'm not quite ready to send it out, but very close.
Cool. We'll go with Brooke.
Hi, I'm Brooke Blanchard. I write under the name B.L. Blanchard. My first novel is not out yet. It comes out on June 1st. It's called The Peacekeeper, and this is an arc of it, or an advanced copy of it, so not the final. And it is an alternate history set in a North America that was never colonized. Comes out from 47 North in, like I said, about 2.5 weeks. And I'm looking forward to that discussion.
I've got the advantage that I've read everybody's stuff. So I've already read Brooke's book, and that was very exciting. And Con, if you want to introduce yourself, your book was also amazing.
Thank you. I'm Con Wong, and my debut novel is The Circus Infinite, which was released by Angry Robot in March. And it is a queer found family tale about a circus that takes down a crime boss on the galaxy's infamous Pleasure Moon. That's the elevator pitch. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Well, Con, I wanted to tell you, I went back to teaching high school briefly just to kind of help out during this weird time. And one of my students bought your book, completely unrelated to me. They were at Barnes & Noble. And when they saw that I was doing this, they got very excited. I know that author, and they told me the whole story about how you asked their mom for the money. So your book is in the hands of one of my. Hopefully, they might be watching this, or probably not, because they've got other things to do. But I just wanted to pass that on to you as something that I thought was really cool. I didn't even pressure them. No, I didn't give them extra points or anything. It was great.
That's so sweet. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, kind of, you know, I was interested in this topic because, you know, hopefully I've got some more books to write. Hopefully they're going to be science fiction. And, you know, looking at some of one of my favorite kind of subgenres of science fiction, which is near future science fiction. I was looking to get some input from you guys and some ideas from you guys about, well, the science of the near future is looking pretty scary, you know, in terms of sci-fi. And, you know, we just went through a pandemic, which was something we used to think was maybe science fiction. What do you think we're going to be writing about in the terms of near future science fiction that's not going to be a hopeless dirge of flooding and bailing out and building walls? And you can all jump in anytime you want.
Well, that's a hard question, you know. How? No wonder we're all like going back, like, wait a minute.
I know, like, what the hell, right?
I don't know if this is where it's gonna go, but I feel like we used to have this weird like teen dystopia genre. And I feel like I'd almost like to see like more dystopian sci-fi show up again. Specifically with like the revolutionary tones. Like I feel like it'd be really interesting to go more into because I mean our society kind of sucks right now and the world kind of sucks. And I feel like if you're going to go into near future, it might be interesting to see more and more books come out that have that kind of like revolutionary vibe to them.
Yeah, I agree. You know, back in the day, one of the things that they said, oh, you're reading science fiction so you can prepare for the future. So we'll be prepared for knowing about what it'd be like to go to space, and we'll be prepared for the world of atomic power and all the wonderful things that were predicted. And I think that's right, Ciel, that, you know, in part, if we're still reading to be prepared, maybe we need to read a variety of dystopias from horrific to mild to whatever, so that we are thinking about, okay, this is what life could be like, and maybe if we do this, it won't be that horrible dystopia, it'll be something more palatable. But it isn't happy making, and so it is an escapist literature, and there is, if you're talking about the future, and just in terms of the markets, I think the market for unmitigated dystopia is not as good as for hope punk, if you want to talk about that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Ciel, and totally feel the need for a kind of like revolutionary storytelling. You know, just to like fuck things up. Am I allowed to curse? I'm sorry.
Well,
I hope so. If we don't, I'm going to be in trouble.
I should have clarified that before we went live. But
Dazola's given us the okay in chat. We can curse.
First away.
So I do see the need for that. But I also feel like that there have been past works that have addressed the time we're in now, like Parable of the Sower, for example. The Handmaid's Tale has been coming up a lot for obvious reasons. And I feel like, I wonder how much readers, I mean, because we're basically living in we're practically living in a dystopia right now. We're very close, we're very on the edge on a lot of different levels. So it makes me wonder how much people want to actually read that. Because it just might be too depressing, but I do think that maybe stories that kind of revolve around community making, ecological healing, like bringing back decimated lands, cleaning up the water, communities figuring out how to do permaculture and live sustainably, and I mean, this is all very hope-y. I feel like that might be, I mean, if we're looking at science fiction as kind of a guide or a how-to, I mean, I don't know that it's really sci-fi writers' jobs to like write how-to manuals for like how to make a better world, but it is our job to imagine a better world. So if we're going to stick to realism or to real world rootedness, I imagine we'll see some more along those lines, ecologically focused. And
yeah, I see things along the lines of like, don't look up, sort of the more climate metaphors really being the one. The thing about dystopia is it takes an aspect of society and it exaggerates it to a degree that seems improbable, but to show you how bad it can get. I feel like we've all been living in one. There was a dystopia written by Sinclair Lewis in the 1930s called It Can't Happen Here. You read that, that is like he must have had a time machine or something, because that has been pretty much 2015 to the present. And so if you're already in it, I think that if you're looking at what's sort of the near future of it, I would want to see and hope to see is what do we do about it? We're already in the dystopia. Can we? I want to believe that there are ways to fix climate change and the environment. I want to believe there are ways to fix the political system. I want to believe that 6 months from now I'll have the same constitutional rights that I do today, and that my daughters will have the same opportunities that I grew up taking for granted. So I think that once you're in it, your perspective, you don't want to see in fiction what you're living. At least I don't. I want to look at what could be better, and I think that's why, if you want to call it hope punk, it's something we want. We feel like we need it. We need that hope.
One of the films I was thinking about when kind of considering this question was Silent Running from 1972. The idea is that, the climate on Earth has gotten so bad, they've taken the last forests and put them up in space, and they're in orbit. And then, the astronaut or the space, the astronaut there gets the order to let the forest go and destroy the forest because it's no longer a thing. And, he sets up a situation where he rescues the last forest and sends them into deep space, under the care of these two plucky robots, and take care of the forest, Dewey, and that kind of thing. I think that's I was thinking there needs to be some kind of note of hope in the dystopian futures we're imagining. One of the things that I was kind of thinking about this morning driving into work was thinking about, might we look at like the futures of relationships and this kind of stuff and families. And, Heinlein did a little bit of this with his line marriages and things like that. And, as we look about like the new model of the family and the new model of like what we need to do to kind of, there's going to be, there probably needs to be fewer kids born. But we need to, maintain the constitutional rights, and we need to make sure that those kids are really well taken care of. And, we need to realize that, bringing a child into the world is like doing a service to society, and maybe looking at some of that stuff, and, doing more of a, almost more of a kind of a future social science kind of thing might be kind of interesting as a way to kind of cope with the terror around us. If we can show that, you might have 3 dads and 4 moms in your line marriage, and you're a happy kid, and, dealing with all that kind of stuff, and just some thoughts I was having as I was driving and thinking about this in terms of like what could be kind of interesting to look at and still give some kind of sense of life going on as normal. I like the idea of the revolutionary that Ciel was talking about, but I what is the revolution? Who do we revolting against? A quiet story about someone who's training to be an arborist, who is the father number 2 of a line family that's got 4 kids, and one of them is adopted, and one of them is a crush born artificial womb kind of child or something like that. I wonder if maybe there's some of that kind of family social stuff that we could write that anybody would actually be interested in reading.
Sure. I think that, back in the day, part of what the future meant was, we'd have glitzy, everything would be better. We'd have better cars, we'd have better computers, we'd be in space, we'd have better houses. I mean, they'd be more high tech. And so we were looking to science and engineering as the yardstick of progress. And I think that we've sort of in a very big way, lost confidence in our science and engineering future. We need it, because if we don't have those scientists and engineers, we will have the end game of climate change. But I think because we're not staking our futures on those folks, I think what you're saying is right. I mean, I think that we're turning inward. And we're not finding meaning in progress in the future. We're finding meaning in asking questions like, are we good people? Are we happy? Can we somehow transcend? And so to think about things that are changing in the future, I think you're right. Sure. I mean, when I was a kid, gay people being on the Supreme Court or being elected president, trans people, that was science fiction. Even though they existed and they were all around us, we couldn't see them. And now that's something that I think most sane people regard as no big deal. Those are our people. We're all the same people. So the fact that maybe there are things now that even at this moment we're thinking, well, that's kind of weird. That'd be a weird thing. A line marriage? How would that work? And maybe if there was a line marriage, people would say those people are odd. Those people are straight. Those people are perverted. All the things that we attach to the notion of other. I think that the future of society is going to change so radically that lots of things that we think are other will at some point have to be not other, but it's all the same. We're all the same.
Yeah, I feel like, sci-fi used to be more like, oh, the future's going to be glitzy, there's going to be so much new technology. But I feel like as time has passed, what's actually happened is that so much development has just become, all shoved under like capitalism. So any type of new technology, it's like, cool, shell out like $1,000 for a new iPhone. It'll have maybe 2 more features than the previous iPhone. And I feel like, the more everything kind of becomes consolidated under like the same, 5 giant mega corporations, the more people want to turn inward and just look at, focus on their own communities and everything, as like an escape from the, giant mega corporations that rule our lives.
I do think that. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go on, Brooke?
I was just going to really quickly add, so much of the sci-fi of the past is what can we do? We're going to go into space. We're going to explore things. Now so much is about, we've seen the repercussions of that. What can we undo? What can we fix? It's almost like we want to go from trying new things to, well, that didn't work out the way we planned. Let's try to fix it and solve it.
Con, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, I think the idea of community and the different ways that communities can form and the different components that make up communities is going to be key to our fictions, but also just to our future. The turning inward that you describe is kind of indicative of, I think all of us on some level, even if we're not necessarily consciously aware of it or can explicitly state it, feel the dehumanizing processes of capitalism, as Ciel alluded to, and that this and this like materialistic way that we live, that's all consume, and like let's take our natural resources and turn them into stuff that we can sell, is ultimately deeply unsatisfying, and I think that dissatisfaction manifests in a lot of what we would describe as social ills, and this impulse of turning inward is a reaction to that, and it's just the beginning of a process that I think all of humanity really has to undergo to get us to the next place. And part of that process is or part of the external process that is kind of folded into that is building community.
It is, as you know, as the sci-fi writers in the room, it's kind of us. It's up to us to go there first, to start thinking about that first, which is,
Well, that's a lot of responsibility.
isn't it?
Save the world.
Isn't it? It's pretty. Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's exciting, and in a lot of ways, it's really daunting. I was thinking about how, I imagine a future where, if you're transitioning from woman to male, or man to woman, or woman to man, that eventually that's going to be so seamless that no one is going to know what you were originally assigned as. It's going to be so easy to transition, or at least you hope that's going to be. You don't have to worry about top and bottom surgery and years of hormones. You'll be able to like put yourself in a box and come out exactly the way you want to be. How do you write that in the future? How do you refer to a trans person if it doesn't matter, because you there's no way to know who was trans. Maybe Jim Kirk was trans, but we would never know because the technology was so good that back when Jim Kirk was a little girl, that the transit. So how do you write about that kind of thing? I mean, it's kind of I won't say Brave New World because that's too Huxley, but it's kind of like really kind of exciting to think about that turning inward, but also what that inward is going to look like with higher tech. I wrote a story a couple of years ago about this place where this guy was his girlfriend was a trans woman, but the only way I could think to like mention it without being clunky is that he remembered this girl back when she was a kind of an unhappy young boy named Alvin or something like that, just because the science was such that you just couldn't tell. There's no way to tell without going back into their backstory. It's kind of interesting. One of the ways that we're keeping it glitzy, I guess, and I'm looking at Ciel and I'm looking at Khan, because your books were both pretty damn glitzy and pretty exciting with laser beams and gravity waves and circuses and all that kind of stuff, is almost to kind of skip ahead, a couple of thousand years to a place where we've gotten cool again, where it's okay to be, kind of dreamy and kind of interesting. And I wonder if that kind of thing is going to be the new escapism, because we're able to okay, well, now that's almost like science fantasy in a way, where we kind of get out to the point where all right, it's okay to dream again. Is that something that we can still do?
I mean, I think so. I think this is going to be a bit of my personal experience. But Con, you might be able to relate to it too. Is so much of like sci-fi media is a lot of it's really glitzy. Like you have a lot of cool special effects and like all that, all the aesthetic of it. And so for me, I was like, oh, I love a lot of mainstream, like, big movies. Like, God, I hate that I'm thinking of a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe because some of that is really sci-fi. But nobody like me is in that. I'm like, oh, hey, where are all the queer people? Yeah. They're not there. And so I was like, well, why don't I just take that aesthetic and that like glam of that that sci-fi can have, but put characters like me into that world?
That that totally resonates with my experience as well, and is where I was coming from with the Circus Infinite and with the other stories I have imagined for that universe. It was a skip ahead in terms of the political reality and climate stuff. But like the backstory of humans in my book, and it's only alluded to, is that they destroyed the earth and fled. And the humans that we meet in my story are the descendants of those people that fled the earth. So on the one hand, my vision of this future society is very hopeful and accepting, but on the other, it's also acknowledging that, oh, they killed their planet and they barely survived. So I don't know where I was going with that. I mean, it was
No,
skip ahead, but also pessimistic as well as hopeful.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, I wrote the Light Years as kind of my skip ahead book. Skip ahead a couple thousand years, but I realized, looking back, that I'm still dealing with the same kind of human nature conflict. I'm still looking at refugees. I'm still looking at that kind of stuff, and still looking at people using each other, and I can't decide now. Looking is that my lack of faith in our ability to grow as people. And if you look at Star Trek, Star Trek is one of those, post scarcity, everything should be cool. We have to go out and find trouble. Trouble's not looking for us, because we figured out all of our problems, but we still keep running into the same kind of human nature foibles. And I guess I wonder is there a way to do spring ahead without bringing back some of the usual forms of conflict that we're dealing with? Is there a new kind of thing or plot that we can write about in the spring ahead stuff that doesn't make people think, well, Battlestar Galactica, the new Battlestar Galactica is really about, the war in Iraq, or, Forever War is really about Vietnam. What are we writing something that's like spring ahead that is something about a new kind of conflict we might be involved in? Is that possible, or are we going to still keep writing the same rise and fall of empire stuff?
Well, this may be controversial, but so there was a movement about 20 years ago called mundane science fiction. So the mundane science fiction theory was you shouldn't write science fiction about anything that can't really happen. So the rule was no faster than light, no time travel, no super powerful AI. Maybe that shouldn't have been one of the things. So when you do a skip ahead into Light Years, which I loved, which I blurbed, and I've certainly written faster than light stuff too, but that's basically skipping ahead to fantasy. And it ties in with another thing I think we've all seen, which is, and Rob mentioned it, with the trend towards science fantasy. So there is no easy fix in the real world for our problems. So let's skip ahead to a world where we can go faster than the speed of light. We have no trouble with energy problems because we have infinite dilithium crystals, or magic works. And so that also is going to solve all our problems because the wizards will, or the gods, or whatever. It yanks science fiction a little bit back toward this escapism that some people thought, oh, well, it's just escapist literature. I think that lots of our far future science fiction is not necessarily escapist, but it does have a premise of escapism in that it talks about things that probably aren't going to happen. And so for us, the people who live in 2022, we and our kids and our kids' kids aren't going to see that world. But maybe we could talk about this world by talking about that other world and sort of contrasting things off of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a point to this, just prefacing that. But you're talking about some more mundane sci-fi and stuff, which I love. And I'm thinking about like Star Trek, like TNG, DS9, and the holodeck episodes. Like where they just take an episode and they do some weird shit in the holodeck, and it'd just be fun and just good times. Good weird holodeck times.
Yep.
I wonder if, like, in the old days, when we were like looking at the atomic age science fiction or looking at Star Trek, that stuff was very aspirational. That made a lot of people want to be astronauts. It made people want to, they wanted to do stuff, and they became astronauts, and they became scientists and computer people. Is what we're doing now in the skip ahead, is that still aspirational? Is it making people want to be gunfighting lesbians? Hopefully.
I hope so. That'd be cool.
Wouldn't that be awesome? But is it, are we going to like, in 100 years from now, are we going to hear someone, well, I was inspired to be X by Khan's story of the Circus Infinite, and now I'm a contortion. I don't know. I mean, what is it? What are we? I mean, and I think about the Light Years where, the main character is kind of a bad guitarist who does YouTube videos. I want to do. I mean, I wonder if that's. Are we still trying to create a situation where we're making people aspire, or have we reached the zenith of aspiration?
I certainly don't think we've reached the zenith of aspiration.
That's the next book. That's the title of my next book, by the way.
And the rock band too.
I certainly hope that people find my work and what I'm doing right now aspirational, but it's not. Like the aspirational part is about society and relationships and community and to a slightly lesser extent the role of the arts and culture in all of that. But it's not like, politics and technology and all that stuff. I'm totally in the space fantasy realm as far as all of that is concerned. So it's not necessarily what I'm doing right now. Who knows what I'll be writing in the future, but I certainly can see other people taking up this mantle that you're talking about.
Do you think that ties back into your looking inward thing? Are you looking inward in your skip ahead as well as with a potential near future thing?
I'm not. There's a little bit of that. I'll be honest, like the genesis of the Circus Infinite, I started writing it right when we went into lockdown. So really, for me, the writing of it was my escape. So that's kind of where it was coming from. And I wasn't, other than the community aspect and really featuring and centering artists and creative people, I wasn't super intentional about the rest of it. It just kind of was like, whatever came up. And then.
Brooke, were you going to say something? I thought I saw a light in your eye, but it might have just been a reflection.
I hope we haven't reached the zenith of aspiration, as you put it. I want to believe that science fiction stories will still inspire people to be better and do better. A couple years ago, there were a bunch of retrospectives on the Apollo missions because it was the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. And I listened to a really great podcast by the Washington Post. And the first couple episodes were about how, science fiction stories from the 30s, 40s are really what inspired the first, the people who created the Apollo program for the push to go into space, the people who created rockets. It was not something that would have probably risen organically, but so many of them had read stories that they wanted to see it happen. I think what's interesting is we kind of live in the future. What we're doing right now, a video chat that's broadcast worldwide, that's sci-fi from even 20 years ago. And remember Back to the Future Part 2, Marty McFly sees this in the year 2015, and that's just seen as crazy. And of course, we're still using faxes, but so I think we've kind of seen that technology doesn't solve all our problems. I think we've now learned that with improved communication, can we really say we understand each other better? Maybe yes, maybe no. Jury's still out on that. So I hope that this hasn't been the end of wanting to make things better. And like all things, we'll see what's not working and hopefully use stories to inspire us.
I think we see a lot of fiction, science fiction, fiction in general, but science fiction it's something I've been very happy to see of people modeling good behavior. The model of good behavior 30, 40 years ago was, I'm a scientist. I'm going to discover things. I'm an explorer. I'm going to explore things. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to by action defines my my worth, my self-worth. And I think that we see a lot of identity fiction now, where, well, like, who am I really? Who am I if I upload? Who am I if I am following social rules that other people don't agree with? There's lots of, I think this is the turning inward, and that is that we see also we're less likely to get behind a protagonist who's all good, who's fighting for the right. We see more conflicted, gray, morally gray characters who have to work stuff out inside of themselves in order to accomplish what they need to do. And so that sort of moral ambiguity, that sort of search for identity, and I turn back to this again. The question gets asked a lot: Are we actually doing good? Are we actually happy? Are we making ourselves happy? This is a thing that Captain Kirk wasn't interested in that, and neither was Isaac Asimov's Harry Seldon wasn't interested in that. But this is a question that is much more important now, I think, in science fiction than it used to be.
Well, what about the other aspect of this, the other leg of what's going on now in science fiction, which is the alternate history, Brooke? You just wrote this beautiful book that doesn't skip ahead, nor does it linger in the present, but it goes back and reinvents the past into something that's really kind of interesting. Do you think that's part of that looking inward and kind of examining where we went right, where we went wrong?
Absolutely. I mean, so the book takes
place in a 2020, and for the record, I wrote it in 2019. So had I known what 2020 would be, I probably would have said it in a different year. But the 2020 where North America was never colonized. And in alternate history, we talk about the hinge point, the point at which real history and the alternate history diverge. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, go back 50 years, 70 years. You see a lot of World War II ones, some Civil War ones. I went back 500 years. And I spent a full year kind of trying to think, what would it look like? And I was thinking kind of linearly, well, this happened, this didn't happen, then that didn't happen. If there's no new world colonies, there's no transatlantic slave trade. If there are no new world colonies, does Europe turn to the rest of the world, or do they not have the resources to colonize anywhere else? And what happens then? And I spent a year before I even started writing it, just thinking about it. And there are so many ways it can go. But what I kind of realized with it is, if I were to ask everyone on this panel, okay, if I told you that North America was ever colonized, could you tell me why you think that wouldn't have happened? I'd probably get a different answer from every single one of you. And I hope that I would, because there's so many ways it could have been different. I don't think it was preordained. There used to be this show I used to watch and it was a documentary show. It's called Seconds from Disaster. I don't know if anyone ever saw it, but it would take these disasters like the Titanic or the Challenger or something like that and point out, they would say in every episode, disasters don't just happen, they are a chain of critical events. And they would show you like these 6 things had to go wrong. And if one thing goes right, then you break the chain. It's when there's this thing. So for a genocide to have happened to 2 continents worth of people, a lot of things had to go wrong for that to have gone out that way. So I don't think, my view is this is what, like 3, really one good thing happening as opposed to all the wrong things happening. This was a timeline that could have happened. I don't think it was inevitable. So just looking at that, and then as to what it would look like, I eventually decided, well, I'm going to yada yada over how we got here, and I'm just going to write the world I want to see. And which is, it's an urbanized indigenous society around the Great Lakes. In fact, it's all over the continents. I've had some people say that wouldn't have happened, and I say there were cities in North and South America before colonization. Sure. They just are gone. They've either been taken over, or they were abandoned, or the record doesn't survive. Some of them still do. I was just at Chichen Itza over last summer. Mexico City is right at Tenochtitlan. There were some in North America as well. And so, like, this could have happened. That's what I wanted to look at as well.
what did happen is not inevitable.
Inevitable.
What could it have looked
Like, and it's not a perfect society. It's very aspirational, but I think that's what we want to do with alternate history. You can go the dystopian route, like Philip K. Dick has done, and Philip Roth and others with, Men in the High Castle, or The Plot Against America. There's one called Underground Airlines, which envisions a modern day where the Civil War had never happened. Or you can go a bit more positive, and like I think we all said earlier, we're definitely living in a dystopia, an alternate history to show, well, that wasn't always
preordained, but I also think showing a way
history could have been different. If a few decisions or a few events in the past could have yielded a wildly different future, well, then a few small decisions now could very radically change the trajectory of where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my hope, is when people read alternate history, they go, oh, well, you just tweak a couple things, the world turns out very different. Small decisions and small actions taken today could have a similar impact. And that's where hope is, that we wouldn't lose hope.
Do you think there's? I don't want to keep bogarting these conversations. If I'm interrupting anybody, I apologize. But it just made me think that, we looking at the skip ahead kind of story. Do you think that there's a story, a plot, a book in a society, a future society that has learned not to be colonizers? Or do we need that kind of push and pull of tension of the empire and the rebels or something like that to make a story? Or is there a story that is about, doing it the right way that people are going to want to read? Because we don't like to read about good things. We like to read about crappy things. So I don't know.
Yeah, you always need that tension. A plot needs an antagonist and a protagonist. Somebody's got to be fighting. Somebody got to want something. Somebody got to want to not keep him from it, her from it. So that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I think there's also, this is my case as a reader. I think there's a lot of satisfaction in seeing, maybe a flawed protagonist, or, maybe like a perfectly good protagonist fighting against something absolutely horrible. I think there's satisfaction in seeing a victory, like an achievement and a success, regardless of how, stereotypical, empire versus republic the villain might be.
Right.
But I mean, empire,
but yeah, I think we as a species, it's ingrained in us. We will try to take over others. We will try to take each other's stuff because it's limited. But the type of colonization we did have, I don't think that was inevitable at all. But I do think, first off, in a story without a conflict, without two people or someone fighting over something, your story doesn't get very far. But what that conflict is, that can be far broader than
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, none of the problems we have today were inevitable. So I think there's that like reader satisfaction of like knowing that in the past something better happened, like knowing that there was at some point a victory, and even if it was really small, like it mattered and it affects today. Because then I feel like that makes us think like, okay, well, are there any little victories that we can do to make the future better? I don't know if any of that makes sense.
I think it does to me. I was also thinking about, I don't want to give too much away about Brooks' book, which is coming out June. Yeah, soon. You're outselling Great Gatsby still in alternate history on Amazon. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. But Brooke did this cool thing where she set up this really, really, really beautiful world that I really wanted to live in when I was there. And then the action is kind of the oldest crime. It's a can I say what it is? It's a murder, right? It's a cop story. It's a police procedural.
Someone was murdered. So
yeah. So so you've done this really cool thing where it's it's not about the alternate history. It's about this murder, and the alternate history is the world around you, and it's really nice that way. Kind of the same way that Ben Winters did the thing with The Last Policeman, which was like the asteroids coming for Earth, but it's a very personal story about a cop who, the world's coming to an end, but he's going to solve this crime just because no one else cares about it. So I think it's a very personal, maybe that looking inward thing that we're talking about. Again, it's about, okay, why am I solving this crime when the world is coming to an end? Why is your character, your character, I don't want to give too much away about this book, because Peacekeeper is a great book, but it's also a very kind of interior story about this person's own kind of personal history and all that kind of stuff that, has no huge bearing on the world he's in because it's a personal story. And, again, it's that kind of that looking in kind of thing that Con was talking about. I feel like that's like the common thread that we've got here is that, no matter whether we're writing it near to us or skipping ahead or skipping back, it's a very kind of interior personal story. We're examining who we are. And, it's like that parable of the sower kind of Octavia Butler stuff, super kind of, epic foundation type stories. It's a more of a personal kind of story. And that could be wrong. I often am, but does it seem like that seems right?
Yeah, that totally resonates with me. And it makes sense too. I mean, I feel like these days the concept of relatability and relatable characters is more in the forefront of people's minds, at least in people in the various storytelling and narrative-based industries, And the kind of story that you just described is it makes it much easier for the reader to imagine themselves in that situation or imagine how they might, in their own personal lives, deal with whatever, that situation is that the character is dealing with, much more so than like, I'm the chosen one and one with the Force and I'm going to kill the Empire or the Emperor, like that's... Yeah, that kind of grandiosity seems to not be where people are at right now. So, and so that what the kind of story that you were just describing is maybe like a reaction to the past.
Things get real big, real fast. So we want to look at, and we want something a little bit smaller right now, maybe. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons the young woman who picked your book up was so excited about it is because she said, like, every time she reads a story about someone with a different kind of sexuality or different kind of gender, it's always a coming out story. It's always like, I've got to tell my parents. And while your character is just very casually ace, it's not like he's coming to terms with his aceness. He just is. It's like, this is what it is. And like the lesbian gunslingers, there's not like a lot of like, it's just, they're just lesbian gunslingers. It's not like a big kind of like self-reveal kind of thing, but it's just like, that's where your representation is. It's just like, this is what they are. And, they don't have to tell their moms or keep it hidden from anybody because that's where they are. And they're just going to like fly around in their ships and shoot things and be awesome and have a good time. And I think that's what a lot of people are kind of looking for in terms of that representational aspect, is they're looking to see themselves, but they're not looking to see the discrimination story, or they're not looking to see the the Underground Railroad story, even though the flight story you were talking about, the airport story or Underground Airline or whatever it was pretty good. But they're looking to see someone who looks like them and their friends doing cool things, having adventures, maybe saving the world, but more likely just kind of figuring out life and shooting people.
Yeah, and back in the day, I mean, when science fiction was invented, science fiction was about invention. And so lots of times you would have an inventor guy invented a time machine. He invents a spaceship. He invents this. And the action of the story all happens around the thing that's new, and looking at it. Oh, well, what does that mean? And how will it work? How many science fiction inventions don't work right off the bat, and some little glitch makes the plot happen? But a more mature science fiction is, maybe I'm contradicting myself, but more mature science fiction is Star Trek. No one's saying, well, I guess we had this starship. What are we going to do with it? I'm not coming out. Nobody comes out anymore. They know, and everyone knows it. So there's no coming out stories. You are what you are. And so the idea that you're discovering who you are as a sort of invention story is kind of the same as just writing about the first light bulb. Yeah, we can stay up all night and read books, but that's not what the invention of light bulb really means to the world, and that's not what it means to have a transparently acceptable, gender identities. Just who cares? Nobody cares.
So is that what's happened? We've reached maturity? Is that the genre has reached maturity, or is that what we're finding?
But the society hasn't.
The society hasn't, but maybe the genre has. Maybe we're in our. Is this our midlife crisis?
I mean, no, this is one of the things we're talking about when we're saying it's not about the technology anymore. Mm-hmm. The science fiction, the kind of science fiction I'm talking about, is teaching people what the world will look like when nobody cares whether you're. I mean, everyone cares whether you're gay, but it isn't a big deal. Right. That's what we're teaching. The society has a long way to go to get there. But when we write about that world, that's science fiction because it doesn't exist. And so, insofar as we are doing good, we can write about that and hope that people will say, well, that world isn't so bad. Assuming that isn't set against the background of climate change and nuclear holocaust. But
interesting. Well, I don't know if we can. I'd like to take some. If there's an audience out there, I'd love to take some audience questions. I don't know. Did we make a plan for that? Was Des going to tell us what they were, or were we supposed to figure it out? I can only see certain things.
I only see us. I'm not seeing.
I see us, and
people seem to like us, but I'm not seeing. I'm not. There's comments on the comment side.
Yeah, but I think there's also more comments on that we cannot see on YouTube and on
Facebook
right. And this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure there are thousands of people watching this right now. It's what time is it in the UK? Dezola's probably fallen asleep.
Yeah, ready. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Oh, there's something that happened. All the comments are showing. Okay, haha. She says, "All right, cool." Okay, cool. Well, I guess I mean I could talk about this all night, but I don't want to keep Dezola up too late. And all dinner parties need to come to an end when you start serving dessert. So I guess I'm curious about. I am wide awake. Remember, I told you this was the highlight of my month. That's what
Also, she did say she was drinking some tea earlier. So
okay,
there you go. She's good for as long as we are.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. Well, I mean, we can sum things up, or we can keep going. I'm easy. How are you guys feeling?
I got no plans today beyond playing video games later in the evening. So,
all right, I'll pose a question because I'm interested. So you have a bunch of people who are early in their career. So you sell a book, it comes out, but you know what? You got to write another one and another one. So what's the project for all of you that you're going to be working on when we leave studio? And what's coming next?
I wrote a bit of fantasy before I went to sci-fi, and I actually got asked by my agent a year ago to go back and basically rewrite the previous fantasy book I wrote that obviously did not get an agent for it. So that's what I've been doing. I have hopefully only maybe another month of editing before it's ready to go on submission. Fingers crossed. As soon as I've said that now, of course, it's going to take months and months and months. But that one is sort of that one's fantasy, so it's sort of like pseudo Victorian Gothic vampire escape room.
There you go.
I don't know how well to describe it. I don't know. Definitely got like sort of heavy classic good vampire vibes, you know, like little bit of sex scenes, a lot of murder, a lot of like, you know, just tearing people apart. The fun stuff.
Yep.
That's cool.
So Rob, you're in a series. Is that your next project? Is doing more of that series?
It is, but I think Brooke started, so I don't want to interrupt.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Rob, no, you talk.
No, go ahead. After you. You have a little like microphone delay, so when you start talking, it starts quiet and then gets loud.
Oh, good to know. Don't know what's causing that.
Probably my laggy internet. I'm writing the second book in the universe of The Peacekeeper, except this is set in a Europe that never had colonies. So it's different locations, different borders, different characters, different plots. So that's that editor within the next 6 weeks. So we'll hopefully.
Was there any colonialism in this world? Because if I remember right from the book, there were still like Mayans and Aztecs hanging around. They were like, you know, so did anybody do the colonial thing in your world?
So no one did the European
Overseas and sun never sets on the British Empire colonialism. I will be honest, I have not plotted out what every region in the world has done. And I think people will always try to take their neighbor's property. But as far as what happened in our timeline, that Europeans went out and colonized the rest of the world, that did not happen. Okay. So it shows where I think they'd be today if they didn't have the wealth of the Americas or Africa or Asia to
rely on. That's so cool. Yeah, because you meant because I don't want to spoil. There was even in your world there was still past wars, but it was wars on the continent of North America among the various
Sure.
So there were still things like that happen. Yeah, I'm really, like I said, I can't say enough about Brooke's book. It was literally like I was, I read it at night and I looked forward, like got into bed, got the book, and I was like always very, very happy to kind of get back to that world. So it's a good one, and I look forward to reading more of that. I'm working on this series. The Mercury Rising is an alt history 1970s alien invasion instead of Cold War kind of thing. And if all goes well, it's going to be a trilogy. The next book is set in the 80s. I'm sending that to the Angry Robot editors in a couple of weeks. And then I got to start writing the last one, which is set in 1999. An auspicious date that will head up the series. And then I've got to figure out what the next thing is going to be. And I promise I'm not here just to steal your ideas. Maybe not. It could happen, though. You never know. Con, what you got going on?
Well, I've turned into my agent the next book set in the universe of the Circus Infinite. I hope to do 4 books set in this universe, but none of them are, nothing's under contract yet. We haven't even pitched yet. It's been too soon since my release date to pitch the next thing. So, but I've already written the second book and it's already with my agent. But in the meantime, I'm working on a standalone in case it doesn't work out with a series. We'll have something else to shop around. And I'm describing it as Final Fantasy meets Logan's Run. And I
am already here for this.
And it's a multi-POV thing. There's advanced technology and a form of magic. I'm like in the middle of like figuring that out, but that's the general concept. So So that's what. But if something happens, with the Circus Infinite world, that one will likely get set aside because I'll most likely be under contract for other things. So.
Jim, what do you have going on, man? You've always got something cooking.
I do. So I don't know. I'm not announcing this, but my as I put my futurist hat on, I don't know if I'm going to write another novel. I got written 7, and that's a good number. I have been working on short stories set in a very loosely coherent future where there is faster than light travel. So what the hell? I'm not mundane. So the 1,000 worlds world building, basically human diaspora. Some colonies have lost track of one another, and so there's lots of discovery, lots of stories where people have wacky ideas of what human origins are. I'm working on a story that I hope to finish soon. That's a title. Its working title is "What It Means to Be a Car," and it's from the point of view of a sentient Toyota in the far future who was the chauffeur for a not a mad scientist, but an Elon Musk of the future. And after that, I have an idea for a short story where this is a space jockey short story where this guy is out on a I don't know the sex of the guy. Maybe he won't have a sex. He's an outpost, but he is sleeping with a artificially holographic version of the Empress of the universe. And so that's how she the Empress maintains her power over her minions by beaming holographic partners of her, holographically beaming herself to be partners with her soldiers.
That would work on me. I would fall for that tactic.
It's like Queen Elizabeth beaming herself into all the homes in Britain for love.
Or for tea.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, you got a book, but you're about to shop though, you said, right? Is that?
Oh yeah, that book is done. I'm just doing a agent, showed it to my agent, had an idea. I thought it was a good idea, so I'm implementing his rewrite, and then off it goes probably to him and to the world in a month or so.
Oh, cool.
I'm seeing a question in chat. Someone's asking, have you all experimented with different genres or have you stayed with sci-fi? I stay within the adult realm, but I do fantasy as well as sci-fi. Oh, the same person said, oh my god, I love Final Fantasy. 7 is my fave because I'm basic, but 13. I'm a 14 stan. That's my favorite. Sorry, I feel the need to comment on that. Whatever for the rest of the group, different genres? Question mark.
I have a story coming out in Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, and maybe this year. I don't know. They never tell you when it's going to come out. And my novel is a hard-boiled PI from it's a hard-boiled PI, but it's a science fiction hard-boiled PI.
That's cool.
Yeah, after this next book, the second book in this universe, my next book's actually a historical fiction and it's very much grounded in a real event that happened in the 70s. So that's what I'm doing next. And just before I move on, Rob has not done nearly enough to plug his own book, and he's the reason we're here. So I'm just going to do that really quickly. I had the privilege of reading an early copy of Mercury Rising and blurbed it. It is a fun book. It is a thought-provoking book. Everyone should, if you haven't read it, make sure you do, because he's being entirely too modest about himself. So just wanted to throw that in there too.
Oh, that's Rob's way. That's Rob's way.
Well, this is so much more fun than doing a reading and all that kind of crap. It's fun to get to know you guys, talk to you guys about this. This is like this is the party I would want. I wouldn't want to be. I don't even like birthday parties. I like I like to be the host. That's kind of my thing. I've written some fantasy. I've published some fantasy stories. I've got 2 fantasy novels sitting in the trunk right now. That if when my agent says it's time to switch gears, maybe I can haul one of them. Actually, I've got three fantasy novels sitting in the trunk right now that I can haul out and do some fantasy that could be fun. But I love mysteries. I love reading, like Robert B. Parker, the Spencer for Hire guy is one of my favorite writers. I would love to do something like that, but I don't know if I have the chops. But it might be something I might try at some point in time.
I have a shelved contemporary fantasy, which I might go back to at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I would really love at some point to write a romantic thriller. But I don't have a concept yet for that. It's just like one of those. I'd like to write that kind of story at some point, but
Cool. Cool. I feel like, Jim, you just do it. You just write, whatever you want to write, you just write. You just, you want to write an essay, you want to write nonfiction, you want to do an interview between Alexa and Siri and, the Google lady, you do it, so you don't hesitate. So,
No, I have, and I read a column for Asimov. So that's a regular thing that I do. My most recent column is about how science fiction got zooming wrong, because we have a long history of video phones, but none of us got it right. The protocols of doing this. How do you know when to talk, when not to talk? The awkwardness of it. How do you know when to turn your microphone off? And anyway, I also write a lot of essays. Yeah.
The answer is you never turn your microphone off, and you make everyone in the Zoom call suffer.
Yeah.
That's the proper etiquette.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
My daughter had to start kindergarten on Zoom, and the kids mastered in about 45 minutes how to turn their mute on and off. And it was like, man, you should teach the adults. 5-year-olds mastered it in about half an hour.
Yeah, it was so funny watching the kids do their classes, because it was all about, like, here's my cat. I'm my 4th grade. Look at my cat. It's all about sharing cats.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do have a question in there about what our star signs are. If you care to answer what your star sign is, I am a Scorpio.
It depends on which version you're using. Are you using the one that's correct, released by NASA, or are you using the old one that is now outdated?
Oh, well,
that's the real question.
That is the question. I don't have an answer for that.
Aries, but I don't want to talk about it.
Fair. Well, I don't want. What are you, Con?
Capricorn.
Hence the goatee. Yeah. Brooke, are you? Do you want to chime in?
Oh, I'm a Leo.
Leo. Ciel, what are both of yours?
I'm either a Libra or a Virgo, depending on which one you're going with.
Well, you probably should go with the science one, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, but nobody does.
Nothing's
Nobody goes
more
with the
scientific
science
than
one.
astrology. Yeah. That's cool. Well, I guess if we're good to roll and move on. Dezola asked if we should start wrapping up. We can start wrapping up. Does anybody have any parting thoughts or parting shots, or book recommendations, or anything that's cool?
And Mercury Rising.
Mercury Rising. Well, thank you.
I too read and loved Mercury Rising. Go get it.
I've read Circus Infinite. You should get that too, and you should get The Peacekeeper, and you should get Bluebird.
I have too many books on my desk. Sorry.
Yep. I think my favorite JPK novel is Burn. I think I like that one quite a bit. I'd recommend that. Is that still? Can you still get that on the ebook?
Oh yeah,
That was
You could get it. You could probably get it on Amazon too. I'm pretty sure you can.
I don't want to date you, but that was the first ebook I ever read, because that came out first as just an ebook, didn't it?
It came out as a podcast, and it actually won an award. And when they announced the award, it was also published by a small press. But when they announced the award, it said it was the podcast that won.
There you go, Jim Kelly, breaking ground. So I feel like, Jim, that you are still the future of science fiction, my friend. I think you've got some new ground that yet to break. So
yeah, thank you. But if I am the future, it's short stories. You guys should write more short stories.
Yeah, I like short stories. I enjoy short stories quite a bit. So I guess thank you very much for coming out and having fun and having dinner, or metaphysical dinner, and having the conversation. And hope to meet you all in person someday, and buy you your libation of choice. I just got some mushroom tea for my book launch. It's not very good, but it's made out of mushrooms.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dizola. Do you want us to? How do you want us to leave?